Merry Christmas, everybody, and welcome to Red Wings Daily, presented to you by FanArch. I'm your host, Kirk MckNight, author of The Voices of Hockey. Broadcasters reflect on the fastest game on earth, and coming to you from the Pacific Northwest, 2,454 miles from Little Caesars Arena. Now, the Red Wings were out of action last night and will be for the next 2 days. And so I'm guessing those LCA lights are powered down, at least on the hockey side, as the Wings take a very much needed 3-day break for the holidays. The NHL is the only of the major sports during the winter time that actually give their players the day off on Christmas and give them a couple of days to be with their family. Like I already mentioned, they're going to have the winter break basically for the Olympics, and that's going to take a huge hole out of the calendar, kind of prolong the season a little bit longer into April, actually help with them kind of starting the season maybe a couple of days earlier because of factoring in all these things, and the scheduling probably had a lot of home and aways and a lot of 2-game swings over 2-day periods to accommodate to those kinds of things. So if you're wondering why the scheduling is so loopy this year and there's so many back-to-back games on your team schedule, you have the winter break, but we're not going to blame it on that. We can blame it on the Olympic break. So as the Red Wings are standing first, I wanted to, since there was no action last night in the league, I wanted to take a little bit of time to see how the Red Wings are stacking up against the rest of the league. Now, against the Atlantic Division, our own division, the division which will play the most games, so far the Red Wings are 5-3-2. Now, those 2 overtime shootout losses came against Boston and Buffalo. Buffalo was an overtime loss. Boston was a shootout loss. The 3 losses, regulation losses, includes the opening night against Montreal. Another loss was against Buffalo. It was kind of an ugly loss, mind you. And then they lost to Tampa Bay once in regulation as well. So 5 of those wins, 2 against Toronto, 1 against Tampa Bay, 1 against Florida, and 1 against Boston. Switching over to the Western Conference, the team, the division that the Red Wings have had the most success against this year is the Pacific. Now, that's a shame that they can only play the Pacific Division 16 games, 1 home and 1 away, because they're 8-3 right now. 3 of those losses are against the Oilers, the Ducks, and the Golden Knights. Now, the Oilers avenged their early season loss in Detroit with the win at home while the Red Wings were on that West Coast trip. So that was the only regulation loss for the Red Wings in those 6 games. The Wings, who had lost to Anaheim in a previous West Coast trip, beat them in LCA, maybe a week and a half later. So they've avenged the loss. And the other loss against the Pacific was in Vegas against the Golden Knights. So that rematch is yet to happen. It happens a little later at LCA in the season. Hopefully they can avenge that one as well. Now, shifting back to the Eastern Conference, talking about the Metropolitan Division, the Red Wings are 5-4-1. So this is kind of the division where they have the least success, I would say, or at least the most losses. 2 of those losses were against the Islanders. The 2 of the first 3 games that they played, Red Wings came away with a win in the 3rd and final game of the series for the season. So there's one of those. There's 2 of those losses. The other loss is against the Rangers at home during that Centennial week. And another loss came against New Jersey. That was one of those tough games. The Red Wings played pretty well against New Jersey up there. They hung with them most of the game. It was 1-0 throughout practically the entire game. But still, 5-4-1, 5 of those wins. I already mentioned the Islanders, but 2 wins in a row against the Washington Capitals. That's something that's great. They did lose in that shootout loss to Columbus, but also one of the wins that they did have in that was against Columbus. Shifting back over to the Western Conference and the Central Division. Now, the Red Wings are 4-3 against the Central, and this is the surprising part to me, because those 3 losses, the Central Division have the 3 best teams, or 3 of the 4 best teams in all of the NHL. One of those is obviously the Colorado Avalanche, and hot on their heels is Dallas Stars, and then it's sitting in 3rd are the Minnesota Wild. So the Red Wings haven't played the Avalanche nor the Wild yet. They have played the Stars. They beat the Stars. They beat the St. Louis Blues twice, so they've already played that series out for the season. And then that 4th win against the Central was against the Blackhawks in Chicago, kind of a revenge win because the Blackhawks beat them up pretty bad and during that Centennial weekend as well. So I already mentioned that one loss against Chicago. Another loss against Nashville, and another loss against Utah Mammoth. So they still have time to avenge those 2 losses to the Predators and the Mammoth. But yes, that is a very tough division, the Central, and the Red Wings still have 2 games left to play against the Avalanche and the Wild. So, speaking of all these things, the Red Wings are doing pretty well. They're in first place. They have a big game this week at home against Carolina, another team that has basically the same amount of team points as they do, 47. So it should be a great matchup. And then they have the Toronto Maple Leafs on Sunday. So in the second of back-to-back games, I've already mentioned these back-to-back games. Here comes another one this weekend. Now, with the league being so quiet these 3 days and it being Thursday, it's time for Throwback Thursday. And I'm going back to June 7th of 97. Red Wings Flyers, Game 4, 2-1 victory for the Red Wings to complete the sweep and win the first Stanley Cup in 42 seasons. Now, going into that game, I think the best way to really start and paint this picture is to look at the 95-96 season, in which the Red Wings won 62 games. The 96-97 season, they won 38. So you have a minus 24 win differential between those 2 seasons. Now you would look on paper and think, okay, yeah, clearly the 95-96, the 62 win team was the one that won the Stanley Cup, correct? No, that is incorrect. The Red Wings came up short, lost in 6 games in the Western Conference Final to that Colorado Avalanche, that series that really just ignited that blood feud. So the Red Wings actually had their revenge against Colorado the next season. To start the playoffs, though, in 96-97, the season that ended with them hoisting the cup, they lost their opening game at home in Joe Louis Arena to the St. Louis Blues. Now, they rebounded and won 2 straight. Then they lost on the road in St. Louis, so they're at 2-2 in their opening round series. This started a string of 6 straight wins for the Red Wings. They won 2 more to close out the Blues, and then they swept the Ducks. So on a 6-game winning streak already in the playoffs, jumping into round 3, they come into Colorado Avalanche. They lose game 1, but then they win the next 3 to really put Colorado against the ropes and basically be 1 win away from returning back to the Stanley Cup final. They'd gone 2 years before against New Jersey and were swept in that. So there's a lot of sweeps going around here. The 95 playoffs, that was a sweep. The 95 Stanley Cup sweep. 96 Stanley Cup sweep of the Avalanche against the Panthers, and then the Red Wings swept the Flyers. So after the Avalanche made it 3-2, the Red Wings closed them out in Game 6 and then swept the Flyers. So, personnel for the Flyers, we had Eric Desjardins, Rod Brind'Amour, and Eric Lindros. Now, at that time, Eric Lindros was one of the more talked about players in hockey, and he scored the only goal for the Flyers in that Game 4 2-1 loss. The 2 goals for the Red Wings were by Nicholas Lidstrom really late in the first period. And then the second goal was scored by Darren McCarty. Now, I think technically they labeled Darren McCarty's second, his goal in the second period as the game winner. I think it's a weird kind of rule in hockey. I don't know, but 2-0. Vernon working a shutout, and Lindros scores with 15 seconds left in the third period to make it interesting, to make it a one-shot game. But the Red Wings were able to, let those 15 seconds die out. The crowd was anxious, ready to finally celebrate for the first time in over 4 decades. One sad note about that night, it was the very last game for Vladimir Konstantinov. As we all know, he got in a limo wreck about a week later, or maybe not even a week later, but shortly after that victory, that limo collision, which hospitalized him and really physically impaired him and basically made it where he couldn't play hockey ever again. So the sad note of 97, obviously following the happy note of winning the cup. But that June 7th, 1997 game was one of those cathartic ones for the fans. Finally got that W, finally raised Lord Stanley's Cup once again in the Motor City. Great night on hockey, and great moment to look back on for Throwback Thursday. Now, We're going to talk a little bit about Larkin. We did mention him quite a bit in yesterday's program, but Larkin had 2 goals, including the game winner against Dallas. One thing about Larkin, he's got 612 career points in 772 games, and this is his 11th season in the league. So he's wearing that C patch. He's one of the seasoned veterans on the team. Obviously, he doesn't have as many games under his belt as Patrick Kane, and I think and James Van Riemsdyk for that matter too. So those 2 guys are kind of the senior members of the firm as far as the locker room goes. But Larks has the C on the the C patch on this sweater. So he's got 4 straight seasons of 30-plus goals, and he's on pace to make it a 5th straight season. He's already got 20. We're not even at the halfway point. He and DeBrincat are tied for the team lead with 20 goals each. And he's got 3 goals over his last 3 games. Those are more important. The equalizer and the game winner. Very emotional game. Very statement win for the Red Wings to come back against a team as tough and defensive-minded as Dallas, to not only tie it and to force overtime, but to win that game in overtime. And a little bit about Larkin, channeling my Chewbacca mom, but I do have my little Dylan Larkin bobblehead, courtesy of Coca-Cola. It's so funny when you see some of these promotional things and you see who backs them. And the Red Wings are backed by Coca-Cola on some of these, and so obviously they're going to be elite. They're going to be some of the nicest things you've ever seen. So still have that Dylan Larkin bobblehead. I've had it for several years now. It was a gift from Ken Cal, radio broadcaster of the Red Wings, and very much appreciate it. Still in my man cave up here and still on that shelf with all my other hockey memorabilia. Now, folks, before we close out this Christmas episode, it's time to go to the No Cap recap. From Tuesday night's win against the Dallas Stars, I mentioned in yesterday's program that JVR had one of the sweetest passes ever to set up Larkin for that equalizer in the 3rd period. And the reporters asked him about it, and throwing his response into the AI translator, this is what we come out with. So we chopped it up a little bit about when I snagged the puck, what he's thinking, what I'm thinking, got to shield that biscuit so I can get a stick on, and it's like, bam, unpredictable play for them to prep for. Got to try and get it there. I know I got options like Cat on the backside or Larks trying to snipe from up high. Dude made a dope play to get open, and then boom, unreal shot, crazy goal. It was a very crazy goal, and if you haven't tuned into SportsCenter, maybe after having that Christmas feast and you're unloading and relaxing on the sofa, maybe throw on some YouTube and get on SportsCenter or something and see if you can catch that highlight, because that was a sweet pass. 5-hole between the defenders, past 2 defenders into Larkin's stick, had it basically right on the tape for a quick one-timer. And I think another editor note that I should say is the fact that I said that it was going to be Ottinger in the crease. That's what they had on paper, but it ended up being DeSmith. Red Wings beat DeSmith. A win's a win, but another editor's note from yesterday's program. The standings people had the Panthers in 5th when I actually was doing the program. And then I woke up this morning to see that they are in 4th. So my apologies. The Florida Panthers are in 4th place. Obviously, always creeping up that division, creeping up on you. Red Wings still in 1st. Hopefully that sticks, and hopefully we can enjoy the rest of these 2 days off. Again, folks, Merry Christmas. And from the LGRW from the PNW, folks.